Well, I think I have just woke up from a nap after watching that last game because boy oh boy, that was probably one of the most boring soccer game I've ever watched in my life. And we of course will get to it or at least kind of get that one over with in terms of tonight's review of this MLS's back tournament. But besides the boring game that we had in the last game of today's action, we did have some very interesting game that happened, and we also had a very crazy game between SKC versus the Colorado Rapids, which, if you're a Rapids fan and you are absolutely livid after tonight, you have every right to do so. But first, let's talk about the game that also took place at the same time as the SKC and the Rapids game was taking place, which was New England versus DC United. Remember, both of these games was playing simultaneously, and since both of these games was literally playing right next to each other, I can basically hear at time there was whistle being blown in the game of each of them, and there was no foul that was happening. And for me, I do get used to seeing that, since if you ever watch my Sport Top series, I always go to like a soccer complex, watch multiple game that is taking place, and I get used to that. But if you're a MLS fan, or you're just a person that likes to watch your team, it must be confusing the hell that you hear like whistle has happened and you don't know why is there a foul and why is things continue. But talking about this game between New England versus DC United, which ended in a 1-1 draw, and I gotta say, DC, they must be one of the luckiest team in this tournament. Well, they're actually either they're one of the most luckiest team in this tournament, or they must be one of the most mentally tough team in this tournament. Because throughout this tournament, not only the fact that I feel like in two of their game they weren't nowhere near of even being in the game, but somehow in some way they find a way to score goals to able to get result at the end of the night. And then if you're a New England fans, this would be a very frustrating result of what happened in this game. Now, before I talk about what happened in the first half, I want to mention that Sorga actually started for DC United instead of Kamara. I'm not quite sure if that's the first ever start for Eric Sorga, because usually it's Kamara the one that is up front for DC. In the first half and for the first 25 minutes or so, not much really happened in this game, with DC United was really sitting deep for this game. And also, my sincere condolence for anybody that decided to pick this game over the one that I'm about to talk about, where just all hell broke loose in terms of what happened in the second half, because this wasn't really the most eventful game either. And then in the 25th minute, Kellen Rowe probably had the best chance of the game so far with his 27 shot effort that unfortunately hits the post. But we head to halftime scoreless between both the Revs and DC United. And in the second half, Segura had a shot that was denied by Turner right after the second half whistle was been blown, and was really the first attack by either team. Books then scored the opening goal of this game in the 50th minute to give the Revs a 1-0 lead. And this goal kind of really reminds me of what happened the other night when the Quakes, of course, scored that equalizer to basically, well, actually, not the equalizer, but the second goal to get them back in the game, because this one was kind of like a deflected cross that was looping up in the air, and somehow, in some way, one of the players was able to get to it, and it was Books, the one that was able to hit that one in to give the Revs a 1-0 lead. Turner then denied Pinea, who was on a one-on-one opportunity, and then, just like the TFC game, out of nowhere, DC United, who wasn't in the game for most of this, were able to score a goal. And they can kind of thank Tony Delamere for this, because this was a massive mistake from Delamere trying to play it back to Turner, but instead he just gave it right to Higuain, who basically just say thank you very much and tapped it into the empty net to tie the game up at 1 apiece. New England did have a chance to go ahead in the 80th minute when Bo unfortunately missed a sitter from 4 yards out. But despite the fact that the Refs had a couple more chances in the latter part of this game, they weren't able to get that second goal to retake the lead and get the 3 points. And in terms of the shots in this game, by far the Revs have more shots than DC has with 18 compared to 6. 5 shots on goal compared to 3 that DC United has. 8 shots off target compared to none that DC United has. 5 shots that was blocked compared to 3 that DC United has. And possession-wise, 49% possession compared to 51% possession that DC United had. And again, the refs, throughout this game, they were by far the better team, but the inability to finish, and also that costly mistake from Dylan May in the 72nd minute was the ultimate downfall, the reason why they weren't able to get all 3 points. And if you're DC United, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, this kind of luck that DC United has keep having, and this kind of mentality that they are keep having, something tells me eventually they're going to move on into the next round, isn't it? I mean, they might be a team that looked like the worst team so far to not have a loss in this tournament, but still, somehow in some way, they look like they're still alive in terms of potentially moving on from that group, and that they do have a chance when they do face against a Montreal Impact team that hasn't really looked good whatsoever throughout this tournament. Now, moving to the crazy game of tonight between SKC versus the Rapids. And as I said, if you're a Rapids fan and you're absolutely livid by the officiating decision tonight, you have every right to do so, because boy oh boy, this was one of the worst refereeing job I've ever seen in an MLS game, and probably the worst officiating I've seen so far in this tournament, because there were a ton of controversy happen in this game. Now, Johnny Russo was back in the starting 11 after he wasn't in the starting 11 in the last game. Kai Kamara actually was on the bench for this game, and Nicholas Benezet actually took his spot. Not quite sure why exactly Robin Fraser decided to do that. I guess maybe he wanted to give Kamara a little bit of a rest, knowing the fact that, you know, Kamara is in his mid-30s, and he's probably not going to have a lot of energy to basically run in this kind of weather condition, and just such a short rest like every single of these team is going to get throughout the group stage. Now in the first half, just 5 minutes into the game, Kellen Acosta scored an absolute bullet from Bassett to give Colorado a 1-0 lead, and I thought the Rapids looked like they were by far the better team in the early point. SKC did have a chance in the 14th minute when Kyrie Shelton hit it near the back of the net, but only for Jack Price to just clear that one off the line. But that was really the best chance that SKC had for the first half, because I thought they looked very flat going forward on the attack, and that they looked like they were out of ideas whenever they get into the final third. And then cue the controversy music in this game, where we saw our first controversy in the 43rd minute when there was no red card after Benezet looked like he swung his arms back and smacked Zuzi in the face. Not quite sure how in the world that is not a red card, because whenever you decide to do that and you decided to swing your arm, that definitely looked very intentional from Benezet. That is usually going to be a red card, but he only got a yellow card in this instant, and that Nicholas Benezet is probably pretty lucky that he was still on the pitch during this point. Now in the second half, the controversy music continued to play, and it just gets to a point where it just got out of control. In the 61st minute, there was a red card shown for Danny Wilson, and this was because he, of course, brought down Shelton, who was going through on goal, and because of that, it was a denial of goal scored opportunity. Now, I thought this was probably the only good call of this game, because it was pretty clear that when Shelton was brought down by Wilson, I was thinking that clearly should be a denial of goal score opportunity when it seemed like Shelton was going through on goal, and especially with Wilson basically kind of almost wrestling Shelton down with both hands. That's usually going to be a denial of goal score opportunity, and thankfully when VAR look at it, which, believe it or not, I don't know why VAR took a very long time to look at it, because it looks very obvious that was a dog so, but thankfully when they look at it, they realize that it was a denial of goal score opportunity, and Wilson got a red card instead of a yellow that he originally get. So the Rapids was down to 10 men, and SKC took no time to take advantage of it when Kyrie Shelton scores from Gadi Kindle. What a volley this was from Kyrie Shelton, who basically hits this one from the near post and just hits an absolute bullet on the volley. Then in the 71st minute, there was a penalty that was given for SKC. VAR says that there was a handball on Rubio, and I'm not quite sure why I wrote handball twice there. And I'll tell you what, when I look on the replay, and when I first look at the in-game replay, it didn't look like it was a handball, and that it didn't look clear and obvious that it was a handball. Now, I noticed there are some people that have talked about after the game when they show that replay, it looked a little bit more clear and obvious, and maybe that is the reason why that penalty was given. But again, I just think from what I look at it, and probably will look at it again in the post-game replay of this, I just don't see how that is a handball, or at least how that is clear and obvious that it was a handball or not. And this, again, goes back to what I said about VAR and how clear and obvious seems to be like a judgment call right now. It seems like this referee feels like the judgment call is basically, it's a penalty. So, yeah, I definitely, there was a lot of Rapids fan was very angry at this call, and I don't blame them with the way that this call was gone against them. But Pulido did put away the penalty to give SKC a 2-1 lead up to that point. And then in the 72nd minute, just 1 minute after that penalty kick was taken, Jack Price got a sending off in, or got his marching order there in this situation, or during this time. And apparently they said it might be in a dissent that was the reason why he got a red card, and he probably said something very bad to the referee. And I usually do, when I see players say something bad to the referee, you really need to say something very obnoxious to basically allow the referee to give you a straight red card. Now, I'm not quite sure if Price actually did that, but I also feel like he probably didn't say well, I wouldn't say he didn't say anything obnoxiously, but I don't usually see a lot of time where players say something that obnoxious and gets a red card in that instance. So this one is kind of a little bit of a mystery, but again, I will sympathize Rapids fan that will be angry about this, thinking that there's no evidence of the fact that Jack Price said something very, very obnoxious that the referee has to send him off. And at that point, the Rapids was down to 9 men, and at that point I was thinking, well, you know, if you're SKC, yes, you're up 2-1 up to that point, but you got to keep going. Like, you got to put the pedal to the metal, because, you know, during this tournament, yes, I understand that, you know, the 3 points is pretty much in balance with the way that they're up 2 men in this, but you got to also think about the goal differential, and that they want to pad the goal differential so that if they get into a situation where they might be in a tiebreaker to potentially move on to the next round, they're going to get the tiebreaker because of goal differential. But instead, that was not the case, and that they didn't really step on it and look to try to score that third goal, and they paid the price for it, because in the 84th minute, Jonathan Lewis scored from Ola Kamara to tie the game up at 2 apiece up to that point. And I'll tell you what, I actually celebrated this goal, and I think I kind of tweeted out that I celebrated this goal, because up until that point I thought the Rapids was completely hard done by the referee, and this goal feels like a justice that they deserve to basically have after all the bad luck that they had throughout this game. But unfortunately, that justice didn't really quite last, because first of all, there was 12 minutes of stoppage time because we had so much controversy, and we had like 3 different VAR decision that was being made. But literally in the first minute of the 12 minutes of stoppage, Graham Zusi scores to give SKC the lead back, and this one took a wicked deflection off of one of the Rapids defender and puts it into the back of the net to give SKC the lead back. I mean, it was a very fortunate goal from Zusi, and I guess he doesn't care how fortunate it is, but you talk about bad luck for the Rapids in this game, and that goal probably just summarized how much bad luck and how much they got snake bit in terms of the refereeing decision going against them, and then of course that unfortunate goal that they have conceded. But yeah, in the end, SKC was able to hold on to a 3-2 win against the Rapids. Shots in this game, SKC had 19 shots compared to 8 that the Rapids had. 9 shots on goal compared to 4 that the Rapids had. 5 shots off target compared to 2 that the Rapids had. 5 shots that was blocked compared to the 2 the Rapids had. And possession-wise, 61% possession compared to 39% possession. And if you're an SKC fan, you know, yes, you're happy the fact that your team was able to get the 3 points. But I'm pretty sure they're also a little bit frustrated the fact that they had to make it so hard on themselves to potentially get a win in this game, and they really miss a big opportunity to pad some stats in terms of their goal differential, knowing the fact that the Rapids was down to 10 men and eventually down to 9 men for the last 15 minutes of this game. But yeah, moving on into the last game of tonight, and let's just get this over with, because let's face it, if you watch this game, which I of course did, knowing the fact that I support one of these teams, you will know that this was probably the most boring game of this tournament. And you know how a couple of days ago when I watched the Quakes play, I was very frustrated the fact that the Quakes were so sloppy on the defensive end, and it seemed like there's just too many times they overcommit in this game. Tonight, I was so frustrated with Minnesota, kind of the opposite of what I was frustrated with the Quakes, where there was just no intent whatsoever whenever they go on the attack, and it just feel like I just wonder, what was Adrian Heath plan going forward on the attack for the Loons in this game? Were they trying to counterattack? Were they trying to kind of at least hold on the ball a little bit on the final third and then find a perfect pass? Because whatever it is, it clearly did not work whatsoever in this game. And the same goes with RSL. I mean, I don't know what was Freddy Juarez's plan in terms of going forward on the attack, because nothing seems to work when they decide to go on the final third too. And, you know, as I said, in the first half, there was really just nothing happened in the first half. And I think the only notable thing that happened in the first half was Rusnak unfortunately got subbed off after he suffered an injury, and maybe this might has a little bit to do with the fact that why RSL just had no weapons going forward on the attack whatsoever to potentially get the opening goal in this game. And that really the only chance in the first half, and probably the best chance of the game, was when Robin Lurt cannoned a shot that rattles the post right on the stroke of halftime. But as we head into the second half, you know, there were a couple more half chances for both teams in the first 5 minutes. But then it just goes back to that lackluster pace where it just seemed like nobody wants to attack in this game. And that seemed like both teams just feel like they're happy to get a 0-0 draw so that they can, of course, get 4 points into this tournament. Like, I know points are very important in this tournament and you don't want to take a big risk throughout the game. But in a neutral perspective, or if you're a fan of one of these teams like I am with Minnesota, it's got to be very frustrated the fact that your team is playing too safe in this game. Like, there's just multiple times where I feel like the Loons had chances going forward on the attack and that there were space that RSL is allowing the Loons to exploit, and they just didn't do that. Like, they just keep making the wrong pass, just keep playing the ball backwards, and it just drives me nuts with the way that how they play throughout the attack. And I think if you're an RSL fan, you probably have the same feeling as I did, where probably there were times that the Loons gave some space for RSL to exploit, and they just don't take an opportunity for that. Now, in the 86th minute, Chacon did had a cheeky chip that was tipped over the bar by McNabb. But again, this goes back to what I said, where I feel like Chacon didn't need to do that. He had Luis Almeria that was making the diagonal run on the left, and I was kind of screaming, give the ball to Almeria. Instead, he decided to take the selfish shot, which, you know, it almost went in if it wasn't for McNabb decided to tip it over at the last second. But he didn't need to do that. You don't need to do a spectacular to potentially get the opening goal. And then on the other end, Sean Johnson actually went through on goal, but unfortunately he missed a wide empty net as Miller couldn't quite get there in time, and that was kind of like the last chance of the game, as both teams late in the game, as it is the case for a majority of the game, just seems like they're happy to play a 0-0 draw, and that is the reason why this turns out to be the most boring game we have seen so far in this tournament. Shots in this game, 10 shots apiece for both of these teams. RSL had 2 shots on goal compared to 3 that Minnesota has. 4 shots off target compared to 6 that Minnesota has. 4 shots that was blocked compared to 1 that the Loons had. Possession-wise, 57% possession compared to 43% possession that the Loons had in this game. And yeah, obviously going forward, both of these teams are kind of still in a very good position of moving on into the next round, and that I feel like, when you talk about how 6 points basically guarantee you to move on into the next round, 4 points is pretty much also kind of right on the borderline to guarantee you to move on into the next round, because of the fact that we have the best third place rule, where the top 4 third place team is going to move on into the next round. And most likely, if you want to be one of those 4 teams, you got to get to 4 points. So maybe that's something that both teams kind of had in mind. But at the same time, I just feel like both teams should have thought about maybe that ultimate prize, and that is potentially top the group in this one. And it will be now very interesting to see how both teams is going to do with RSL playing an SKC team that is looking to try to top the group, and Minnesota, they're playing against a Rapids team that is desperate to try to get something so that they can maybe be one of those best third place teams. So yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the review of tonight. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of tonight's action? And yeah, hope that you guys enjoy this video. Tomorrow I am actually going to do part 1 of the preview, where I look at the first 6 games from match day number 3, and I will also kind of look at the scenario that is going to happen in order for a team to advance in tomorrow's preview. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.